I've put up with this for far too long, and it is about time we finally made a change. This stock radio with these terrible green letters, that's original from 2009, and at this point it's probably one of the few electronics that is still original to the Jeep. But that ends today because our head unit and sound system are long overdue for an upgrade. It is like Christmas morning out here thanks to the guys from Boss Audio Systems. And, well, I mean, depending on when this video goes up, it actually could be Christmas morning. All of this goodness is going into the Jeep, so let's take a look at what we got. So we're kicking things off by adding this 10-inch subwoofer underneath the seat. I've got a pretty cool place to add these tower speakers. Of course, we've got a wiring harness and an amplifier. And then the last piece of the puzzle is this Boss Audio Systems Elite 10-inch floating screen. Of course, all of these will be linked down below if you want to check them out for yourself, but I'm going to go through, show you how I install everything, and do a quick review on exactly how this all goes together. Now, before we get into installing all of the new parts, I should probably catch you guys up on what I have as far as audio goes in the Jeep, because as you can see, we had to make some changes when we did the chop. And the major change of all of that was removing the sound bar that is normally right overhead. Because we removed the sound bar, we ended up adding some 6x9s into the back of the cab here. Those housings are actually built into the back of the cab, so I can't really move them or do anything with them. They are, however, wired up to where two of the speakers would have been in the sound bar. Unfortunately, though, they just kind of fire right into the back of the seat, so I don't really get a lot of volume from those speakers. So not only do we not have any good bass because there's no subwoofer that would have normally been in the back of the Jeep, but we're also missing all of the sound that we would have normally from the soundbar overhead. And that's where these guys come in. These are a 4-inch wake tower speaker, but I'm thinking I can kind of tuck it up here in this corner, in this dead space, and that's probably a pretty good spot for them. Pulling the stock radio out, it's actually pretty straightforward. You're going to want to release this panel from the top, and then there's a couple of 7mm bolts right here holding on the faceplate. We're also going to twist out our vents, and then the front of the dash should be able to come forward so we can release the radio. Oh yeah, don't forget to remove this panel at the bottom. It just kind of pops in, so we'll pop off the clips for that. And then at the bottom of the panel, there's 2 more screws. I'm not going to worry about pulling any of the connectors because there's enough room here for me to be able to pull the radio out. So I'm just going to kind of leave it like this. You could go ahead, unplug all the connectors, and then remove this panel entirely. That's just not completely necessary. Just like that, the radio will come out, and now we can actually unplug all of the harnesses from the back of the radio. And now this guy, well, that's going straight in the trash. Now, as I mentioned, we are replacing that stock unit with this Boss Elite floating screen. This is a 10-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It also has a backup camera, and we're gonna wire that in as well. Opening up the box, of course, the backup camera is right on top, as well as some mounting hardware and wiring, and instruction manual and warranty info. And then right here, that right there is what we've been waiting for. And the brain of the entire system is right here. This is a single DIN radio, and our factory radio was a double DIN. So I went ahead and picked up this from Amazon. I will also link this in the description. This is essentially a double DIN to single DIN conversion kit. So this is going back into the Jeep first, and then we can start prepping our Boss Elite head unit. And our double DIN to single DIN is going to slide right into place. Make sure that all of the wires are still accessible, and we'll go ahead and use those factory bolts to screw that in. So a really important part of wiring this whole thing up is to actually use a wiring harness kit. This one comes from a company called Crux. I'll go ahead and link that down below. Because of the CAN bus system in the Jeep, you actually have to have this little interface guy. We're gonna go ahead and plug this in, and we'll test the head unit before we do a final install. Another piece that I had to pick up is actually this adapter for the antenna. This is on Amazon, it's a couple bucks, but it's going to allow you to adapt the factory antenna harness to something that this can receive. And then this is the best part of the whole deal. And if our wiring is correct, when I turn the key, this should power up and we should have at least the radio playing. Looks like it's starting to boot up. That's a plus. Just agree.
Dealers while supplies last.
O'Reilly. So all of that checks out. Now we just need to run all the wiring for our subwoofer so that we can finally put the head unit in its place once and for all. So I didn't want to bore you guys with all the wiring details because I'm pretty sure that's the #1 way I could get you to click off the video, and we don't want to do that. But here's where we are. I've already installed the head unit. It is tucked into place nicely, and I ran all the wiring for the sub and the cameras and all that good stuff, and it is all hanging out here now. So now that we've already tested and know that the head unit works, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on installing the sub and the tower speakers and finish wiring all that stuff up. That should help us free up a little space in here. You have got to be kidding me. I literally lost these keys to the truck while we were at the beach, and I had to call a locksmith to make me another key just so that we could get this behemoth home. That was like 4 months ago, and the locksmith charged me 400 bucks for a key. Let me show you what we're looking at as far as placement for the sub. As you can see, there's this hump here in the floor, and that's going to keep the sub from being able to sit down perfectly flat like we would want it to, but I think that's going to be okay. Now in your setup, there may be a better location to mount this, but as you can see, I really just don't have a ton of options, so we're going to stick with this location, but I did add some double-sided tape that is going to be here on this hump to kind of secure it into place. It's also a foam padded tape, so that's going to give us a little bit of distance between the metal of the floor and the sub itself. And in my mind, that makes more sense than just having the sub touching the floor directly, because I don't want there to be any crazy rattles going on. So I'm going to pull off the back side of this tape, go ahead and put the sub into location, and then we'll start wiring everything up. And just for good measure, I'm probably going to go ahead and shoot a self-tapping screw right here into this one. I may end up trying to find a spacer that's going to allow me to use these bolt holes as well. We'll just kind of see what it needs. So if we're using this location under the passenger seat, we actually have a ground nut right here in the body that I'm going to use for the ground on the amp. Now I did run all of the wiring. I've got the input and the remote from the back of the radio, and then we have our power tucked up here underneath the carpet here. That's going through the firewall and back up to the front. So now we just need to test and make sure that this works. Now I'm going to mount my sub controller right here on the bottom of the dash. You can kind of put this a lot of different places, but for me, this is going to minimize the amount of wire that's showing because it's going to tuck up underneath this panel, and I think this will be a good spot for it. Now we'll run this wire over towards the edge and pop this panel back in. And the rest of this wire can go behind the plastic panels, under the center console, into the sub. And once you run that wire all the way back across, all you have to do is simply plug it in to the controller section. Now I'm going to zip tie up all of these wires, and that'll make our sub install completely done. And this is exactly why I broke out the machete from TMR, because it makes bending brackets like this super easy. And this should work perfectly for mounting the speaker to our roll bar. All we have left to do is cut off the excess, slap some paint on it, and get it bolted up into the Jeep. And there you go. That's our finished bracket, pre-drilled and painted so that they are ready to install. I'm gonna go ahead and actually pre-drill the hole in the roll bar up there so that we can simply bolt this in. Man, I love when a plan works out like it's supposed to. Got one side in, everything is bolted in, and the position on that I think is perfect. My plan right now is to pull this speaker out and tie our new speakers into those so that they're all playing the same thing. If for whatever reason it doesn't sound as good as I want it to, we can always add an amp into all 4 of those speakers, but I think it's gonna work out just fine. But there's only one way to know how it's gonna sound, and that's to try it out. The placement on the tower speakers I think is absolutely perfect because it replaces all of the sound I would have had right back here with my sound bar from the factory, and it's pretty much directed right at my head. Now's the time for us to try this out and see how it sounds. Now you guys saw where the head unit came with a reverse camera that we could have installed. However, if you guys remember a previous video, I used to actually have a nice dash cam / reverse camera setup that went right here on the rear view mirror. Unfortunately, that one died, but I do have another one on the way. So instead of using that rear view camera on the back, I decided to actually switch it up and install it on the front. So this is where I have that camera mounted on the front. The view that I have from right here is better than probably anywhere else on the front of the Jeep. It's tucked up out of the way, and I really should never have an issue with it being placed in that spot. Now, because it's expecting to have a rear view camera in the system and we're switching it to front, we need to adjust some of these settings. I did use the power from the front camera power output on the back of the head unit, so I'm going to turn that on, and we won't need the parking guide assist because we're just going to be using this from the front. And now that this is all set up, you have the front camera on and the front camera power, we can actually go back home, hit our camera button, and there you go. We have a front facing camera showing you the disaster that is my garage. Now, one thing to note is the camera is flipped, so it is reversed in picture. I may be able to adjust that somewhere here in the settings, but I haven't taken the time to actually do that yet. But with that said, we do have the front camera on all the time if we choose to, and then, like I said before, we'll use the new backup camera reverse for the rear, and that just runs all the time as well. Of course, this does come with Apple CarPlay and I guess Android Auto for those of you who haven't gotten with modern times. You do have a regular radio tuner and you have AV inputs if for whatever reason you wanted to plug in your VCR or something. Now, this is wired Apple CarPlay, but as soon as you plug it in, it will populate and we can go through and have all of our apps, including text, maps, and it looks like Boss actually has a radio app that seems to just bring us back home. So interesting situation. I'm gonna have to get in here and play with this a little bit more, but nevertheless you have access to everything you would with a standard Apple CarPlay, and it's charging my phone while I'm at it, which is I think probably the biggest benefit to a plug-in Apple CarPlay versus a standard. Now, when we're looking at the screen, it does protrude a little bit from the front of the dash, but that actually gives us one really cool feature that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is that we can actually angle the screen. Now, for my setup, I'm going to have this screen turned all the way to the driver's side, and that's going to make sure that I have complete visibility from the driver's seat of my new radio. Our speakers are mounted, our sub is mounted, the new head unit is installed, and I've got to say this is a long overdue upgrade. I know a lot of us spend a lot of time upgrading the exterior of our Jeep, and that's all fun and well, but really, we're on the inside all the time. So it's about time I upgraded the interior, and I think I'm really gonna enjoy this new setup. Once again, I wanna say a huge thank you to Boss Audio for sending all of these parts out. I'm gonna link them all down in the description if you guys wanna check them out. Trust me when I tell you the pricing on this stuff is really hard to beat, and the quality, frankly, for the money, I haven't seen anything like it before. But with that said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already and you want to, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.